Carnivores 2 is a game you've likely already heard of if you're watching this video. It was a genre-defining hunting game from the late 90s where you hunted dinosaurs, or you were hunted by them. The setting of the games alone provides a spark of mystery, a newly discovered planet covered with strange areas and structures you're encouraged to explore. And as a result, mysteries and rumors about the game have been passed around the fanbase since its beginning. Over the years, many players have claimed to have witnessed strange things occurring in their games. Most common were tales of spotting an animal that simply wasn't in the game, with the most famous examples being the Carnivorous Moschops or the Seismosaurus. But of course, many of these stories are just that, stories. There's no evidence to back them up beyond spoken word, and we all know the internet can be hard to trust. But what if I told you there are creatures rumored to be stalking Carnivores 2, and that there's tangible evidence of their existence? Ladies and gentlemen, I introduce you to the mystery of the Ghouls of Delphaeus Hills. The story of the Ghouls is one that is shrouded in mystery. References to the mystery online are scarce, if not absent, and it has remained very obscure and unspoken for many years. As a result, where exactly the story should begin is unclear, but I have decided to start at the source of its recent proliferation, the Carnivores iceberg. The original Carnivores iceberg was a Reddit post from July 6th, 2020 on the Carnivores Lodge, posted by the Green Spy, though whether or not he is the original creator of the image still isn't entirely clear. The contents are a typical video game conspiracy iceberg, a list of strange theories for games that get more absurd as you go deeper. Some of what's included is true, some are meaningless, some are jokes. But there is one particular entry near the bottom of the list that caught the eyes of some. It simply states, Delphaeus Hills Ghouls. This prompted some questions as to what exactly the quote-unquote ghouls were and what they had to do with Delphaeus Hills, the first map from Carnivores 2 on both the Reddit and the Carnivores Saga Discord. This, along with other mysteries shown on the iceberg, inspired a user who is very important to this story, Carnivores Hunter 113. Carnivores Hunter made his first post to Reddit August 14th of 2020, over a month after the original iceberg was posted. In his post titled, Delphaeus Hills Ghouls, Real or Unreal, he explains his intrigue into the iceberg, and his particular interest for the Delphaeus Hills Ghouls. He goes on to explain that he had already begun his search for the ghouls. Quote, over the past few weeks I have dedicated my spare time to exploring the hills of Delphaeus, scouring the landscape for any possible evidence to substantiate these bold claims. It's been almost 200 excursions in both regular and observer mode, dawn, day, and night, but I have yet to see any concrete evidence that would prove the existence of these ghouls. He goes on to say his faith in discovering any evidence of the creature is beginning to falter, saying he will quit and look into something else if he doesn't find anything soon. Little did he know what he was about to discover. Soon after his original post, Carnivores Hunter posted something new, titled, Update on the Delphaeus Hills Ghouls. Attached to it was an image, and in the comments, a description of an encounter. He describes, quote, it was very far away, and by the time I noticed, it was too late, as it ran away before I could get a picture of it. So, all I have for you is an artistic representation of what I saw. What I know is that it is a tall, bipedal creature, which appears to possibly be a green, reptilian version of the Yeti. He further describes his hypothesis that the radar tower, which he was near when he spotted the ghoul, could be something the creature was attracted to, and resolves to continue looking for the ghoul in hopes of capturing a photograph. The reaction to Carnivores Hunter's findings were, at times, skeptical. Many on the Discord did not take his claims very seriously, and some on the Reddit even doubted he was a real person at all. The former claims are understandable, as Carnus had very little to show for such an extraordinary story. The latter was discredited by the man himself. At the same time, another user named JamesCoolCrafter15 made a post titled, "I Now Believe in the Ghouls," where he claims to have briefly spotted a ghoul in the Carnivores mobile port. I have some doubts about this claim, for again having very little evidence to back it up, and for other reasons I will get into later. More importantly, Carnus Hunter responded to the post, and it clearly made a foundation for the quote-unquote hard-coded theory, which again I will be getting into later. About a week after Carnus Hunter's first sighting, he made a new post, and this one was big. The title says it all: "Photographic evidence of the Delphaeus Hills ghoul. Info and comments," with an image attached. As said in the title, Carnus tells the tale of his newest encounter in the comments. He explains how he had undergone many expeditions near the radar base of Delphaeus Hills, all which proved to be fruitless, and thus decided to search in a different area. He decided upon the swamp in the southwestern corner of the map, which he believed was, quote, a potential ghoul hotspot due to its creepy nature. He explains the rigors of its expedition, the hours he sat in the swamp, reloading the map hundreds of times, until finally he saw something that made his blood run cold. Standing in front of him was a bipedal creature staring directly at him. He pulled out his camera just as the ghoul began bolting away and managed to catch an image of the creature. This image, though it's admittedly pretty low quality, clearly shows something is there that isn't normally, and that something is a ghoul. I remember myself seeing this on Discord when it was first posted. It was joked about by some, but others, myself included, was convinced by what I saw. Carnus goes on to explain his interaction with another Carnivore Saga community figure in his quest to learn any more precious information about these mysterious creatures. That figure was Ophius, known as the creator of Carnivores Migration and Carnivores Far North. The two exchange information, and Carnus repeats what he was told in his post. Ophius states that he first heard something like the ghouls when he was younger, browsing the second Carnivore Saga forums, which have since been deleted from the internet. He reports seeing a thread in which someone believed they saw something strange in their game, which today we would recognize as a ghoul. He recalls that while most did not believe him, some others reported having seen something similar in the past. Later, Ophius himself reports to have seen a ghoul while creating Moraine Domain for Far North. He has elaborated more on Discord, where he has said that he first rationalized it as a T-Rex he misidentified, but after seeing what Carnus Hunter described, now believes it to be something much more unexplainable. Carnus backs Ophius by elaborating on a theory he has, that the ghoul is a creature which was initially intended to be removed, but was hard-coded into the files in a way that makes it spawn extremely rarely, only on the first map. This would make sense, considering its possible appearances in a Carnivores 2 mod, and maybe even the mobile port, and how it's only ever been seen on the first map of Carnivores 2, Delphaeus Hills, or a replacement of it, Moraine Domain. As an aside, the fact that Ophius backs this story should bring up its credibility by quite a bit, considering he is an established model in the community, which would make him more trustworthy, and not give him a reason to, say, lie for attention. The reaction to this post was much more positive than the others, with many more people believing the story up front, given the photograph and backing from larger figures. But even so, let's face it, the picture is terrible. Even though it does clearly show something, you can barely see what it is to the point where some people thought it was just a plant at first glance. To prove such an extraordinary finding, a better picture is necessary. Harness Hunter, seemingly understanding he needed more proof, promised to keep the community updated on any future findings. A little over a week later, Harness Hunter kept his promise. Once again, the title says it all. Attacked by the Delphaeus Hills Ghoul. Info and comments. Harness describes the encounter as follows. I'll be reading the full text due to its great importance. I had simply been wandering across Delphaeus Hills, as I had for the past week, with no luck in finding any ghouls. However, as I was walking, I finally managed to spot one. Unlike my other encounters with the ghouls, this time the creature had appeared much closer to the hunter, and I could much more clearly see its brutish features. I have to say, the creature managed to scare me, as I had never seen it in such detail before. I had wanted to kill a ghoul in order to get good pictures of it in my trophy room, so I pulled out my weaponry and attempted to shoot the creature. I was almost shaking as I fired the first shot, thinking of how important this hunt could be. Immediately after doing so, the ghoul of Delphaeus Hills began to charge at me, running directly at me. This was an unprecedented move by any ghoul, and it nearly scared me to death as it did so. I kept shooting, but I soon realized it was no use. The ghoul either was not being hurt, or I would certainly die before I could manage to bring down the beast. So I decided my best course of action would be to take a picture of the ghoul before it killed me, which I did. And it is what you can see today. Harness explains further that his game crashed immediately after the ghoul killed him, but does not attribute that fact to the ghoul itself, instead believing it to be similar to a glitch he saw in Carnivores Triassic, but the game can sometimes crash immediately after being killed. As someone who had also seen this glitch, I can back that up, but believe it or not, this is the reason there are no images of the ghoul's death sequence. Seemingly content with the wealth of knowledge she has released, and with the pressure of school starting up again, Harness Hunter at the end of his post announces that he will no longer continue his expeditions to hunt the ghoul. Perhaps a bittersweet end to the investigations, but his findings have indeed left us with great results. This image is easily the most important proof of the ghoul that we have right now. Though again it is low quality, it indisputably shows that there is indeed a creature present. To me, and most others in the community, this is the official ghoul image, likened to that of the Patterson film to Bigfoot, except this is the real deal. It even appears in the most complete iceberg, which includes much more serious information than its original predecessor. Despite everything, I already know there is one big question lingering in the minds of everyone watching this. That is, most simply put, is any of this even true? In my own personal opinion, I have little doubt that the ghoul is indeed a real thing. However, I can understand why some would be more skeptical of the possibility. Here, I will discuss some ways people have said the ghoul could be fake, and attempt to rebut them. First off is the most obvious detraction. The images are all faked. The one most often called fake is this one, because it's the clearest picture we have. This is an understandable response to an initial viewing of these images, but on a closer inspection, it becomes clear that there's little evidence to suggest the image is fake. It's very obviously a real model, entirely original with an original skin to match, and it is also clearly in-game as there's even shadows on the ground. Its design even looks like the original Action Form's canon style, so this doesn't look edited at all to me. And even if it is, that means Harness has the ability to make such a quality model, skin, and possibly animations, all while having little contact with the community outside of Reddit. This image being fake just doesn't seem likely to me. I've seen people say that it's suspicious that the game just happened to crash when the ghoul killed him, like it's a creepypasta trope or something. I mentioned it while talking about the story, as did Carnus, but this is a totally normal glitch that can happen and has happened to me. I get how it looks inconveniently convenient, but I don't think it's that weird. I've seen people say that the ghoul is just a Yeti reskin a surprising amount of times. This is just so obviously untrue based on the proof we have now that I don't get why it keeps coming up. But here's a comparison between the two. Pretty clearly different and hopefully enough to put this rumor to rest. This was a short-lived rumor, but I felt the need to address it. People said Carnus was a fake account because he created his account recently, and since then has only posted on the Carnivores Reddit. This is pretty obviously just a lurker who didn't want to make an account until he needed to post something, which isn't all that uncommon on Reddit and shouldn't be weird. He's also still commenting on other posts occasionally to this day, in response to DMs people have sent him. Definitely not a throwaway account. This was something I considered when Carnus was doing his investigations. Just how could he have found so much evidence in support of the ghoul in about a month? It didn't quite add up for me, until I started considering just how much time Carnus put into this. He claims to have spent hours searching through Delphaeus Hills hundreds of times. This was also during summer quarantine, so the dude being able to have tons of disposable free time does make sense. There's also the fact that Carnus just could have gotten very lucky with what he saw combined with that. I think anyone with the same amount of time, patience, and dumb luck could accomplish the same thing in the same amount of time. This is a big one. If the ghoul is real, why isn't it in the res text? Everything in Carnivores can be found in the res, so why is the supposed ghoul nowhere to be found? Carnus also understood this was a problem, and that is how the hard-coded theory originated. Now, we don't know for sure, but we presume the ghoul was hard-coded into the game during early development, was attempted to be removed, but somehow still managed to get in the game, although very rarely. It's not too hard to believe considering that Carnivores 1 had no res at all, having its own features hard-coded into the game. So perhaps in earlier development the ghoul was implemented similarly, but removed for whatever reason. Considering this, I think it's iffy, but entirely reasonable for a ghoul to be hidden somewhere in the code in a jacked up way even the devs couldn't figure out. Another big one is the simple fact that the ghoul could have seemingly gone undiscovered for this long. I have reasons behind how this could be, but I will be discussing them a little bit later. I promise not to forget. For now, I'll move on to discuss deeper questions about what the ghoul is, assuming it is indeed real. Here's a question I've had. Where exactly does the name Ghoul come from? Despite being around for a while, the name seems to be a relatively recent invention, first being coined by the iceberg. But why would you call such a creature a ghoul? I may have found the answer. In a thread on the Saga forums from about 2012 about creating a, quote, ghoul skin for the Yeti. I believe the skin is actually based on the infamous image of the rake, but the connection to our ghoul is close enough that I believe it was the name's inspiration. Perhaps an iceberg creator was familiar with the rumors and attached the name to it with the idea that it was a spooky Yeti. Of course, this is just a theory. Now, why does the ghoul only show up on the first map? Well, if the hard-coded theory is to be believed, the ghoul spawn is inherently extremely glitchy, may only be allowed to spawn in a certain map due to that. However, it is entirely possible that the ghoul can indeed be spotted on other maps, and we simply have been over-investigating just one. But this may be unlikely, as every single sighting has occurred on Delphaeus Hills, or modded versions of it. Are ghoul hotspots or ghoul vectors a real thing to be accounted for? Short answer, I don't think so. As seen in the best image of the ghoul, the creature was encountered away from either supposed hotspot or vector, which makes it unlikely to me that it would only appear in certain areas. Can the ghoul be encountered in the mobile ports? As I mentioned much earlier, Reddit user JamesCoolCrafter15 claims to have encountered the creature as such. Personally, I find this unlikely. Even though there have been ghoul sightings in the mobile ports, I find it hard to believe it could actually exist there. Firstly, because the entire game was ported to a new platform, I find it unlikely the ghoul could have survived the transfer, and would likely have been accidentally removed while the source code was tweaked and rewritten. Secondly, so many more players are playing the mobile version of Carnivores rather than the PC version, and yet there are even far fewer sightings there than on PC. Personally, I think mobile users are safe from any surprise ghoul attacks. But then again, you never know. Adding to the last question, can the ghoul be encountered in Carnivore's Ice Age? I'm not entirely sure myself whether or not you could. For one, there have been no encounters with the ghoul in Ice Age at all, but it is also far less played than the original Carnivores 2. It's entirely possible it's there, but hasn't been reported. There's also the chance that because Ice Age has slight edits to the source code, that the ghoul could have been inadvertently or intentionally removed in the process. However, I still can't entirely be sure if it's there or not, unless someone spots it in game. That was a bit of a detour from my last point. There is something I've been wondering about when it comes to source modifications of the game. There have been various patches released for Carnivores to help with modding and to help the game run on modern systems, and these patches made changes to the source code. Now, it could be possible that these patches also inadvertently removed or broke what was left of the ghoul. Then again, this is just a theory, and I can't be sure if it's true, and I also don't know if Carnivores Hunter has these patches installed or not. Is the ghoul a paranormal phenomenon? Absolutely not. What we call the ghoul is entirely explainable using real-world logic, and is not a ghost or haunted game or anything like that. I've heard it be bounced around that the ghoul is actually a primarily aquatic creature, which could be why we see it so few times. I think this could have some backing, as the land of Delphaeus Hills is much more investigated than the water, but I'm not convinced the aquatic ghoul theory is anything but a theory. Here's the biggest question of them all. How could such a creature go undiscovered in the game for years? I mean, the game has been out for over 2 decades, and we're just now finding out about the ghoul? Now, we know that supposed ghoul sightings go back a few years from now, but that's still a lot of time between discovery and the game's release. Well, I've been thinking about something that might seem unrelated. Remember the ghoul skin discussed earlier for the Yeti? Well, going back to that thread, the author says that the ghoul had been requested, and yet it is the only mention of such a ghoul on the whole forum. So then I thought, where's the rest of the conversation? Well, the answer is simple. They simply could have been privately DMing each other, or the thread they originally discussed the skin in had been deleted. And then it hit me. The reason why ghoul sightings are seemingly absent from the internet. We simply may not be able to access them. Think about it. How often could people on the forums have reported a ghoul without evidence and to be mocked until they or a disgruntled admin deleted the thread? How often did people discuss seeing weird things in private, but never shared it with the outside world without proof? How often did people see weird things, but were unconnected to the fandom, so we never heard their tale? How often were such sightings reported on now deleted forums, websites, comment sections, message boards, or anything else and are now forgotten? How often did people see something weird, but just explain it away as nothing? I know Delphaeus initially did that. Therein lies the answer to our problem. Ghoul sightings are not absent. They have been hiding in places we cannot get them due to the nature of the internet. Believe me or not, I think that makes perfect sense. Of course, one question still remains. What are the origins of the ghoul itself? Now, I have no direct evidence of this, but I have a theory as to what it could be. Again, everything I'm about to say isn't entirely based on real data, but just makes sense to me from what I've put together. So this might be far-fetched right from the start, but I believe the ghoul may have been intended to be the ancients alluded to in Carnivores 1. It's just a natural continuation of the story to reveal what exactly they are in the sequel. Of course, it could also just be a more generically weird creature, but the setup is perfect. Whether I'm right or wrong about that, the ghoul's purpose must have been rendered obsolete, as if the hard-coded theory is to be believed, and I think it is, the ghoul was intended to be removed from the game. Perhaps if it is indeed an ancient, the devs moved away from the ancients and focused more on human colonization in the sequel, making the ghoul's inclusion unfitting. Or maybe the ghoul's role in game was just too surprising for what was supposed to be a relatively simple hunting game, and was cut as such. Or maybe there were time constraints, or the devs couldn't figure out how to fully program the thing in, so they chose to cut it from the game. Whatever the reasoning was, it's clear that the ghoul was never truly removed. Why this isn't fully known, but there's some theories behind it. It could just be an honest mistake by the devs, who tried to remove it but accidentally left part of it in game. Perhaps it was left in intentionally, in case the devs later decided they did want to use the idea. But they never did, and also never fully removed what was left behind. Or maybe it wasn't even supposed to be removed at all, and was left in as an Easter egg, which continues to be kept a secret by tight-lipped devs who know about it, or just forgot about it. There's a lot of ways this could have happened, and we can't know for sure which way, if any, is correct. After the release of Carnivores 2, the idea that could have been the original ghoul, a secret and frightening huntable, came to fruition in Carnivores Ice Age in the form of the Yeti, which may have been based on the original ghoul. This would explain some similarities between the concepts and their executions. Now, it's pretty clear my theory does have its problems, but that's just what I believe the thing is based on the evidence we have. I'm sure if we find out more, any hole should continue to be filled in. As of now, the ghoul is still an unsolved mystery. Though there are many signs that point to it being a real animal, there are still certain factors that leave some in doubt of its existence. I can understand this, and there's only one way to solve it. If you have seen this creature, please tell us your story, and if you have direct proof of it, please share it with the world. As a whole, thank you for watching, and happy hunting.